Thanks for having me. I wish I was there, by the way, and it's actually a lot of fun when Neer and I are in this same place at the same time, discussing a lot of these issues. I'm going to share my screen. Let's make sure this works. All right, so I'm going to be discussing a manuscript that actually just came out a couple of weeks ago. It actually normally takes about an hour to an hour and a half to explain this, so I'll do the best I can in this short time period. I want to acknowledge my colleagues and friends, Brad Wilcox from the University of Hawaii, Lloyd Demetrius from Harvard, Cambridge, and Hiram Beltran Sanchez from USC. This paper wouldn't have happened without them. And I'd also like to acknowledge the American Federation for Aging Research for making sure that this paper received public access. This is a big deal, and we're greatly appreciative. So let's let's get started. So I'm going to start out with this image here of the Sistine Chapel. I assume many of you have been there, have seen the Sistine Chapel. The reason why I put this up here is because what I'm going to try to get you to do is to see something you haven't likely seen before. Sistine Chapel is a good example because you're standing on the floor, you look up at the ceiling, and all of a sudden it becomes three-dimensional. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I'm going to try to do the same thing here. I don't know if I can do it in 15, 20 minutes, but I'll do the best that I can to get you to see something that my colleagues and I actually saw quite some time ago, and we've now confirmed that this phenomenon has happened. So these are the issues I'm going to raise. Why is longevity predictable and limited? Why is life expectancy decelerating in the face of accelerating advances in medicine? And how long would we live without medicine, which I call the first soft limit, and the second soft limit is basically where we are today. So one of the foundational questions that many of the speakers have been addressing is why do we live as long as we do? I'm going to be addressing this issue. Is there biology in the life table? I like using this photograph. This is actually a fairly recent photograph of my wife and I and our three grandsons. And the question is, why does it take 29,000 days for humans to get from this small version of my 8-month-old grandson to the 70-year-old version that my wife and I are at today? And I will point out in a very important way, because it's highly relevant to the topic of this paper, not a single person in this photograph would be alive today if not for advances in medical technology. This is going to be a central theme of the paper and a central theme of this entire logic and line of reasoning. So I'm going to start out by giving you the answer. Basically, I'm going to go to the end, and then I'll be providing some evidence to support this. But I'm basically going to argue that humans. Oops, hang on a second. That humans. Oops, trying to get rid of my picture here so I can see this easy. That humans are living significantly longer than previous generations, and that the vast majority of the survival time that we are experiencing today is what I would call manufactured time. I would suggest, and my colleagues and I have suggested, that if you remove all medicine and the vast majority of public health, and you estimate how long humans would live without any sort of medical interventions at all, we think it would be somewhere around age 60 for a human population, and that all of the survival time that we have miraculously added in the 20th century and the first couple of decades in this century is time that has been manufactured by medicine, by medical technology, and not just by improvements in risk factors, which of course have been relevant, but I would say that the vast majority of us are living on this manufactured time, and this is an important point that we've been trying to make actually now for over 30 years. Humanity we argue, is not moving towards an upper limit to human longevity. We are moving away from a natural limit. We are manufacturing survival time, and we've gotten very good at it. Probably most of the people in the room are living on this manufactured time. Certainly, our entire family is living on it. And once you realize that we're basically stretching this rubber band of longevity, we argue and have been arguing now for over 30 years that the rise in life expectancy must decelerate as the medical band-aids that we've created to deal with these diseases and disorders associated with living longer run up against an immutable, currently immutable force. Of course, this whole meeting is devoted to changing that immutability, but it's not there yet. And in the absence of an ability to alter this immutable force, the rise in life expectancy must slow down. So this is an image that I use. I published this in JAMA in 2018. The title of the paper was From Lifespan to Healthspan. It was basically a way of suggesting that humanity really should be declaring victory in our effort to manufacture survival time. This is a distribution of death for a US population, females in 1900 and 2016, basically illustrating what we did to ourselves in the 20th century. It looks like this everywhere in long-lived populations. We've basically reduced early age mortality. We've shifted the distribution of death to later ages, and we've now exposed the saved population to an elevated risk of senescence, of aging. So the slowdown in the rise in life expectancy that we predicted decades ago, and I'll talk about that in a moment, was not then and is not now a product of failure. It is a product of success, of manufacturing enough survival time so that people can be exposed to the immutable process of aging, and therein lies the logic and the rationale for why the rise in life expectancy must slow down. I use the word must. Now, back in 1990, when we published this in Science, it was more of a hypothesis. We were basically suggesting that, once about 80% of a cohort makes it out to somewhere between the ages of 65 and 95, where aging becomes the dominant risk factor, that the rise in life expectancy would slow down dramatically or stop altogether. Now, we demonstrated this again in 2001 in an article in Science. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. This latest article now demonstrates that this is no longer a hypothesis. It is now a proven fact that long-lived populations must experience a slowdown in the rate of improvement in life expectancy, short of efforts to modulate the biological process of aging. Now, this is the figure that came from our original Science article in 1990. Now, I realize that for many who may not be familiar with this is basically our way of estimating the magnitude of the reduction in the death rates required to get to these higher life expectancies. Now, I'll tell you, when my colleague Bruce Carnes and I first did this calculation in 1989, we took a double take because we weren't quite entirely sure what we were looking at. We compared it to what would happen if we hypothetically eliminated major fatal diseases. We redid the calculation over and over and over again to make sure we had done it right. We did it right. It suddenly hit us in 1989 that we were not looking at just a bunch of numbers, just a bunch of statistics. We were looking at biology. We were looking at human biology that was telling us a story about how long humans can live. Now, we got very excited when this happened. We looked through the historical literature, some of which I'll show you in a moment. But the story here is a really powerful one about human aging and longevity. In 2001, we decided to basically replicate that original study. We added a few things to it. And we published this in Science and saw the exact same thing. We used data from the United States, from Japan, from France. Take a look at the survival curves on the right. You'll notice from 1900 to 1995, there was a 30-year increase in life expectancy. That's the formal definition of radical life extension. It's about 3 years added per decade. Well, we answered the question, what if it would all happen again? And the answer is, if all of those reductions that happened in the 20th century happened again, the gain in life expectancy would only be 10 years. What if it happened a third time? The gain in life expectancy would only be 6 years. This is the basic concept of entropy in the life table that we were originally talking about in 1990. Pretty powerful message that we understood back then. But a number of other researchers decided that they were going to basically ignore the data that was telling us that this was happening and generate linear forecasts of past trends in life expectancy. And these weren't even past trends in single countries. These were past trends in what was called best practice, which is taking the longest lived subgroups of the population and extending these forward in time. There's an unstated assumption when you perform a linear extrapolation of life expectancy. That unstated assumption is that the declines in death rates at older ages, over the age of 65, must accelerate. It must occur at a faster and faster pace just to retain the same incremental increases in life expectancy. We've now demonstrated that not only is this not happening, the exact opposite phenomenon is happening. In other words, the companies that have followed the advice of these linear extrapolation models, projecting that half the babies born today are going to live to 100, or that life expectancy at birth is going to go to 100, have made profoundly bad decisions based on this particular paper projecting that these large increases in life expectancy were going to occur. That's what led to this latest manuscript. I'll discuss the evidence in a little bit. But like I said, the latest work that just came out a couple of weeks ago basically demonstrates the phenomenon that we first observed in 1990. We demonstrated again in 2001. It is no longer hypothetical. So communicating this concept of entropy and this deceleration in the rate of improvement in life expectancy has not been easy. We've tried to find different ways of doing this over the years. Originally in 2001, we published this article. This is a republication that came out in 2003, If Humans Were Built to Last, where we basically illustrated what the human body might look like if there was a designer, and if the designer, had longer, certainly healthier life in mind. And we basically illustrated that we would probably look a bit different than we do now if longer life, and certainly healthier, longer life, was the goal. We published another article in The Scientist. So the first article in Scientific American was all devoted to morphology, what was going on outside. In the second article we published in The Scientist, we basically re-engineered humans and went inside the body to see what kinds of changes would be required in order to deal with the kinds of issues that go wrong with us as we grow older. This wasn't our way of saying we could be a better designer or that we could design. It was really a way of illustrating that we have to live with the design that we have until something else comes along. And of course, that's what this conference is all about, is trying to figure out what that something else is. But until then, we have to live with what we have, and that creates basic limitations. Now, when Bruce and I first discovered this concept of biology in the life table, we knew we probably weren't the first ones to see this. As it turns out, we weren't. Benjamin Gompert saw this in 1825 when he saw an exponential increase in the risk of mortality in the populations he was looking at. He referred to this consistent pattern to the timing of death as equivalent to Newton's law of gravitation. In fact, here's his actual language. He referred to this phenomenon as a law of mortality. And he was trying to find out what specific force might have led to this, this phenomenon that we're observing of this consistent pattern to the timing of death. But he definitely referred to this as a as a law of mortality. Well, as it turns out, a large number of other researchers were looking at the exact same thing in subsequent years. William Maycomb, made this observation on the law of mortality in 1867. Again, let me be clear. What we have all seen here is biology in the life table. These are not just a bunch of numbers. This is telling us a story about human aging and longevity. Loeb and Northrop published on this in 1916, looking for a temperature coefficient for the duration of life. I should point out, by the way, that this entire narrative, this history of thinking on this particular issue, my colleague Bruce and I published in Demography in 1997, I believe, entitled Ever Since Gompertz. So if you're looking for a detailed description of all of this, it's contained in that article. From biology, Major Greenwood, 1928, looked at notes on the biology of a life table, the law of mortality. He saw the exact same thing. We were a little surprised to see this one from Leo Szilard. He was from Fermi. Fermi is the laboratory. It was down the street from where I used to work at Argonne National Laboratory. Szilard was involved in the construction of the atomic bomb, but he had an interest in aging. And had written on this particular topic and saw the exact same phenomenon, not just in humans, but in other sexually reproducing species as well. Hamilton, from evolution biology, and I'm not going to have any time really today to talk about the evolutionary theories of senescence, but my goodness, these fit together like a lock and a key. It's really an amazing connection between evolution biology and duration of life. From zoology, Devey discussed life tables for natural populations, saw the exact same phenomenon. One of my favorites was Raymond Pearl in the early part of the 20th century, and take a look at his language here. We are dealing here with qualitatively identical expressions of an obviously fundamental biological law. The light bulb turned on for Raymond Pearl as well. He saw this law of mortality. It took us, of course, many decades later to finally see it. Raymond Pearl saw it. This is what he published on the survival distribution of humans and Drosophila. Once you control for time, you stretch out the time lifespan of a Drosophila to that of a human. He projected that they would overlap. There's a much longer story here, but my colleague Bruce and I and Doug Graun published a piece where we took the mortality schedules of humans, dogs, and mice and put them on the same time scale, which is one of the biggest problems when you're comparing duration of life of different species. You have to control for time. And we basically solved the law of mortality that Benjamin Gompertz raised in 1825 and Raymond Pearl tested in 1922. That paper should be readily available. This was really the first glimpse of manufactured time, which we actually described in the manuscript itself, which was telling us the rising influence of senescence in long-lived populations. So in colloquial terms, what does all of this mean? What is this concept of life table entropy? How do we interpret this? The longer we live, the more difficult it becomes to live longer. The metric of period life expectancy should become less sensitive. It has been. The rise in life expectancy should decelerate. Actually, that should be must. Internal organs operate with declining efficiency. Body parts wear out. And as the immutable force of aging becomes the dominant risk factor, as it has in long-lived populations, the effect of medicine on life extension will experience diminishing returns. This is not a suggestion that we shouldn't be trying to make us live longer through medical intervention. My goodness, most of us wouldn't be here without it. Of course, we need to continue along these lines, but we need to recognize that these are temporary Band-Aids that we've created for us that essentially patch together older humans, my wife and I included, among them, and probably many of the people in the room here. We've been patched together by medicine very effectively. It's been enormously successful. But the ability of these patchworks to manufacture more and more survival time must diminish as aging dominates the risk factor. This is the imagery I like to use. The story of Sisyphus pushing a boulder of increasing mass up a hill of increasing slope. That's the concept of life expectancy rise in the future in the absence of interventions that modulate aging. Now, I want to put in one quote here from, normally I don't use too many word slides, but after our article came out in Science in 1990, there were a lot of people that disagreed with us, including Jacques Vallon, a well-known demographer from France, who said, no, advances in medical technology will accelerate. It's going to drag life expectancy with it. There were lots of folks who made that same argument. Jacques Vallon, the light bulb finally turned on for him, and in 2008, he finally realized this phenomenon of entropy that we were talking about is happening. And it's exactly what you would expect. And his language is virtually identical to the conclusion that we came to in 1990, that the period of rapid increases has come to an end, rapid increases in life expectancy. We're going to have to do something different going forward. In fact, we even predicted in the early 1990s, following the publication of this article, that if we don't do something to modulate senescence in some meaningful way, we may very well see an increase in frailty and disability among future cohorts of older individuals. Now, what would radical life extension look like? This comes from our new manuscript. Well, if life expectancy, let's say today is 80, if it went up to 110, which would be the same 30-year increase in life expectancy that we saw during the 20th century, you would have to have a distribution of death that looked like this. This red line, basically it would require an 88% reduction in death rates from all causes at all ages. That's total mortality, a reduction by 88%. 70% would have to survive beyond the century mark. About a quarter of the population would have to live beyond the age of Jean Calment, the world's longest lived individual, and about 6% of the population would have to live to the age of 150. We didn't draw any conclusions about this. We figured you could draw your own conclusions about how plausible something like this is. This is the percentage reduction in mortality required to produce a 1-year increase in life expectancy. This is one of the things we demonstrated in 2001 as well. And exactly as we had predicted, the magnitude of the reduction required to achieve the same incremental equal increase in life expectancy has increased. That's exactly what you would expect if this phenomenon is occurring. Indeed, back in 1990, it was about a 9.5% reduction in total mortality to get a 1-year increase in life expectancy. It's now somewhere between 10 to 11.5%. So it did, in fact, go up everywhere in the world in long-lived populations. This is the image that really got a lot of attention. Remember, it was claimed that the magnitude of the reduction in the death rates would be sufficient to yield a 3-year increase in life expectancy per decade, or a 0.3-year increase per year. The exact opposite phenomenon occurred. In fact, basically, in literally almost with one exception, it actually never occurred since 1990. Now, keep in mind, in the last 30 years, advances in life extending technologies did in fact accelerate quite dramatically, just as many people predicted, including us. But the magnitude of the effect on life expectancy decreased, as we had predicted in 1990. This is the demonstration of the phenomenon of entropy that we were originally presenting as a hypothesis in 1990. It is a hypothesis no more. Percentage surviving to age 100, keep in mind the prediction from some was that half the population would live to 100. This is not going to happen. And even in the longest lived populations, you're getting, somewhere upwards of about 5% of original birth cohort, significantly less for males, making it out to 100. You do see a nice breakaway from Hong Kong. That's a different phenomenon going on there, but it is at least possible, but it's not 50%, and it's not even close. This concept of lifespan inequality is just a way of measuring the dispersion in the distribution of death in the population. When lifespan inequality goes down, mortality is compressing. We now have definitive evidence that even in long-lived populations where life expectancy has been going up incrementally, lifespan inequality has been going down. The translation is mortality compression is occurring. The mortality distribution is not shifting to the right as what's required for radical life extension to occur. I'm actually gonna stop there because I know many of you have seen these figures of the importance of going after biological aging and not just the diseases associated with it. And I'm going to stop here by reminding everyone that we have to be careful what we wish for, because just making us live longer without making us live healthier could in fact be harmful. And I would suggest and have suggested, certainly at the end of our manuscript that we just published, that this is perhaps, in addition to some of the work that's going on the economics of aging, represents some of the strongest and logical rationale for the importance and value of geroscience going forward. We must move rapidly in this direction to modulate senescence in a way that extends the period of healthy life. If folks are coming along claiming that they're going to achieve radical life extension through any of these interventions, I would suggest that this is an untestable scientific hypothesis, and we probably should avoid language that makes claims that we're going to live significantly longer as a result of something that requires decades to get an answer to. Which is why we have suggested that we should be zeroing in on health span going forward. And in today's world, where most people are experiencing longer lives, and it's been a wonderful ride in the last 120 years. We have to be cognizant of the fact that now senescence is getting in the way of further progress. We need to zero in on aging itself, and the metric of health span, healthy life expectancy, I think should be our primary metric of success. And that indeed is why I'm so excited about meetings just like this. You just heard Nir speak earlier and others speak earlier about potential therapeutic interventions that have the potential to do this. I'm as excited, if not more so, than just about anyone on the importance and the value of this work that's going on in geroscience and why we need it so desperately in today's world. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. Wow. That's a very good way to end this session, and we couldn't agree more, I think, on the need to develop therapies that will take us healthier, longer, rather than just older for a longer time. Any questions? Just a second.
Jay, I remember the day we were in Sweden that you almost went into fist fight with the European demographers. Remember that?
Yes.
So maybe we can have a peace deal here. I have a question, but I just want to emphasize two things you said, or I want to say them differently. And that one is, we're not saying that in the future we wouldn't be able to break this ceiling. It's just not something that we know more now. But also the fact that our maximal life expectancy, maybe Jean Clement was different, but Jan Vik suggests 115 is the statistical average, that we have still 35 years, or if you want 20 years to realize, okay, within that. So we have a lot of freedom of work here. But this is my question. You use the term entropy, and I think this term that comes from physics, it seems a little bit confusing to me for demographer. And the reason is that the law of entropy in closed system is very different than what happened to the entropy of the world, right? And so I'm not sure I understand why entropy is limited to systems that every system has a different rule of how they deal with it.
Yeah, so actually Lloyd Demetrius, who developed this concept in the 1970s, along with Nathan Kiefitz, I probably should shy away from the use of the term entropy, and Lloyd doesn't like it when I use the term in that particular way. And so if you remove the term, entropy, and you get to the basic principle of statistics and life table functions, it's basically a way of saying that once about 80% of the population makes it into these older ages, the gain in life expectancy must slow down. And so remove the word entropy, but recognize the observation that that slowdown has to occur in long-lived populations. And by the way, I've had some folks recently ask me about insured populations, and that insured populations tend to live longer. I'm going, yeah, guess what? We can mimic insured populations by taking highly educated subgroups of the population, and they have the lowest mortality. And these populations with the lowest mortality are the ones that are getting closest to this phenomenon that we're observing. So yeah, maybe I should stay away from that term, but I think the overall phenomenon stands, and the evidence is no longer hypothetical; it's definitive. This is a phenomenon that is human. It would be a phenomenon that you would see in other species. You would see the exact same thing in dogs and mice, and elephants, and you have to be careful on how you extrapolate from other species to humans, because you have to control for time. And a lot of researchers in our field don't do that. It's the reason why you can't, assume that humans are going to live twice as long because you can make a mouse live for twice as long. It doesn't work that way in the real world. But yeah, thanks for that question. I appreciate it.
There is a question here from the audience.
Yeah, I have a question. You didn't seem to separate extrinsic factors and intrinsic factors. Like intrinsic is what happens in the body, but extrinsic, suppose everybody goes to optimal lifestyle, whatever does it mean, optimal clean food, optimal physical activities, everybody practices to marathons, even in the 60s. What happens that? I mean, can you make the separation?
Yes, thank you for that question, because that has actually come up since the publication of the article. I'll give you the short answer, and then I'll give you a slightly longer one. The short answer is that it's not going to have nearly the effect on life expectancy at the population level as you might imagine. And part of the reason is, first of all, there are subgroups of the population that are already doing this, that already have healthy lifestyles. They exercise, they eat right, they go to their doctor, they get patched up, frequently, and they don't live much longer than the rest of the population. Now, much longer is a relative concept. If they live 5 to 10 years longer, which certainly in Chicago, you could see the right side of one road, people live 10 years longer than people on the left side. It's in part because the people on the left side have unhealthy lifestyles and they're shortening their lives. They would probably live as long as the people on the right side of the street if they adopted these healthier lifestyles. But these folks with healthier lifestyles that are doing everything right, they're not living to 100 routinely. Most of them are dying between the ages of 65 and 95. Now, the slightly longer answer actually is far more interesting, and this is why I like this question. Keep in mind that the patchwork that we've created, the medical technology that we've created, has been in large measure designed to combat these unhealthy lifestyles that we've adopted. So we become obese, we have heart disease, we develop cancer. Some of it's going to be occurring naturally. We've developed these medical technologies that are incredibly effective in manufacturing survival time. You could look at the 1, 3, 5, 10-year survival rates for people with diabetes, with obesity, with cardiovascular disease. Look, stents work. Medicines designed to treat cardiovascular disease, statins, work. That's why so many people are taking them. They're incredibly effective at reducing mortality back to levels that are consistent with the rest of the population. So if you do what we should be doing, which of course is, reducing our body weight, not smoking, adopting this healthy lifestyle that you're talking about, perhaps we can eliminate many, if not most, of these medications that are manufacturing survival time for us. But all it's going to do is recreate the survival time that we're already getting, or at least some of that survival time that we're already getting through this patchwork medical technology that most of us are living on. Now, of course, the real value of doing what you're suggesting is in healthy life. And of course, that's precisely why it should be pursued, because health span probably would be extended quite dramatically, but life expectancy at the population level probably would not increase nearly as much as you think. Look, a cure for cancer only adds about 3 years to life expectancy. That's a cure, reducing the risk to zero. So getting everyone to adopt a healthier lifestyle, while we should be doing that, is not going to have nearly the effect on the life expectancy of a national population as you might imagine. And it's because we've been successful in manufacturing survival time through medicine.
If I may also ask a question, thank you very much, Jay and Nir and everybody. Maybe the last one before concluding. I think one of the critical points in your work, in your latest work and also earlier, is that we're pretty much stuck in our life expectancy and lifespan, maybe also healthy life expectancy, unless we find successful interventions into aging. And many people seem to have missed this point. That's exactly our goal, to find successful interventions into aging in order to have a chance to have a longer and healthy life. And that's the point we're trying to get across, also in this conference and elsewhere. And people seem to be missing it. Do you also encounter this reaction? How do you think? Why is it? How can we break through this barrier in human understanding?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've seen this several times, especially among people that are strongly advocating for large increases in life expectancy. I would just, what I've been telling them is, why don't you just read the paper? The language is in black and white. It's unambiguous. We're basically saying exactly that the only way we can break through this glass ceiling that we're approaching, or at now, I think we're approaching it, is to do the very thing that we're talking about, that you're talking about at this conference. And I would put in an important emphasis here. I would say it's not just something that's desirable. It's not just something that we should, be, pursuing gently. I would argue for an aggressive pursuit. And I have, no idea which one of these interventions is actually going to work. And nor do I care. There's probably going to be more than one that actually works, because the door is wide open for us. Evolution didn't lead to aging or death genes in humans and other sexually reproducing species. Those can't happen. And so the door is wide open for us to intervene. And if we don't, and this is why I think this work on geroscience is so important, if we don't intervene and we continue to patch ourselves up to live longer and deeper into the red zone, where frailty and disability rises exponentially, I don't think we're going to like what we see. I think we're going to see some pretty dramatic increases in various forms of dementia, in particular, the components of the body that are not replicating, that represent Achilles heels of the human body. We've tried to publish on this to explain these concepts to people. It's not always sinking in because people sometimes have a fairly narrow view of the future. And there's a lot of embellishment and exaggeration that's going on in our field of, people claiming, half the population is going to live to 120 or 100. And I would point out something that Nir raised earlier about this maximum lifespan of 115 or so. I would emphasize that just because one person can live that long doesn't mean we all can. Just because one person can, or Usain Bolt can, run as fast as he can, doesn't mean that we all can. In a genetically heterogeneous population, I would argue that that's biologically implausible. And so in a population, you're not going to see everyone living out to the observed longevity of the longest lived individual. And I wouldn't set that as a goal. The population goal that I would set would be different than the one that I would set for maximum lifespan. I'm not personally all that interested in maximum lifespan and records. I think it's interesting, but it's not the end result that I think we should be looking at. Again, you get to the end of the paper, you're going to notice zero in on healthy life expectancy. It's something that we can measure. I consider it to be the most precious commodity on earth that we can manufacture. This is where I think geroscience is headed in manufacturing more healthy life. Will we probably live longer as a result? Yes, probably yes. I think it will allow us to break through this glass ceiling. I don't know by how much, nor does anyone else. So I would really try and avoid the embellishment and exaggeration of everyone living to 120 or whatever number people are making up. We don't have to make up numbers in order to justify the work, this important work that's going on in geroscience.